Imagine buying a brand new SUV, driving it off the lot, bringing it home, and then realizing you don't actually own the motors inside your own seats.
Yeah, it sounds like science fiction, but the manufacturer does.
Right. And they can completely change how those seats function while you're, fast asleep in your bed. Welcome to Auto News Talk.
Thanks for having me. It's a wild landscape out there right now.
It really is. I mean, normally when you think about buying a car, you just look at the sticker price, the horsepower, maybe the color.
Yeah, the fun stuff.
Exactly. But the automotive industry is caught in this massive, invisible squeeze. We're looking at a perfect storm where billions of dollars in hidden manufacturing costs are they're colliding head-on with a financially stretched consumer.
It's a huge collision.
And this immense pressure is forcing automakers to radically alter not just what they build, but how they sell those vehicles, and even how they fix them while they sit in your driveway.
It's a profound shift. I mean, it is completely rewriting the rules of the road.
So how are we going to break all this down for the listener?
Well, what we're going to do in this segment of Auto News Talk is trace the entire life cycle of the auto industry as it exists in this exact moment. We're going to start way upstream, looking at the macro level financial pressures weighing on the manufacturer.
Okay, the big picture stuff.
Right. Then we'll follow that current downstream to see how those massive corporate burdens directly impact your personal wallet.
Which is what everyone actually feels.
Exactly. And finally, we'll look at how all this financial friction culminates in this fierce battle over vehicle safety, over the air data, and who actually gets the legal right to hand you the keys.
I love that. Think of it as like mapping the DNA of your next car purchase.
That's a great way to put it.
I want to start with that invisible tax that's reshaping the DNA, because the numbers here are, they're just staggering.
They really are.
There's this reporting on import tariffs that shows automakers have absorbed at least $35.4 billion in added costs since those tariffs were implemented.
Yeah, $35.4 billion.
That is an astronomical amount of money just vanishing from the bottom line.
It is a massive financial burden. But, the analysis of these import tariffs reveals that this pain is distributed very, very unevenly across the industry.
Oh, really? So it's not just a flat hit for everyone?
No, not at all. It all comes down to how heavily a brand relies on imported vehicles or overseas components. The report highlights that Toyota faces the largest impact by far.
Okay, how much are we talking for Toyota?
An estimated $9.1 billion in added costs for a single upcoming fiscal period.
Wait, $9.1 billion just for Toyota?
Just Toyota. Meanwhile, if you look at General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis combined...
The Detroit Big Three.
Right. They absorbed about $6.5 billion over a prior reporting period.
Wait, how does the math on that even work? Toyota alone is eating over $9 billion, while the Big Three combined are taking a $6.5 billion hit. Is it just a flat tax at the border?
Not at all, and that's exactly where the supply chain chaos comes in. The reporting breaks down a highly complex structure. So there's a 15% levy on vehicles imported from places like the EU, Japan, and South Korea.
Okay, that makes sense. Standard import stuff.
Right. But then there's a 25% tariff on the value of non-U.S. parts inside vehicles that are actually built in North America.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, places like Canada or Mexico. Add in a 50% tax on steel and aluminum.
50%?
Yep. And a massive 100% tariff on Chinese-built electric vehicles.
Okay, so if I'm an automaker and I build a car right here in Michigan, I am still getting taxed heavily on the metal and the imported sensors inside of it.
Exactly. The source actually provides a very specific, memorable scenario to explain the headache this causes for supply chain managers.
Well, I'd love to hear that.
Imagine a single component. It might cross multiple international borders before final assembly. So a suspension part might be forged in one country, machined in a second country, and then installed on the assembly line in a third.
Oh, man. So every time it crosses a line...
Every time it crosses a border, the tariff exposure amplifies. It creates immense planning uncertainty. I mean, how does an automaker commit billions of dollars to build a new factory when the geopolitical math on their part supply could completely upend their profitability?
It's basically like trying to run a bakery, but the price of your flour changes wildly every single time the delivery truck crosses a state line.
Yes.
How are you supposed to put a final price on the cake?
You can't. And that is exactly why we're seeing automakers just, take items off the menu entirely.
Which brings us to what's happening on the dealership lots.
Right. There's an OEM update on Volvo that illustrates this perfectly. They are abruptly dropping the highly anticipated EX30 electric vehicle from their U.S. lineup after an upcoming model year.
I was actually reading about that.
Yeah.
The EX30 was supposed to be this huge deal, right? Like an affordable entry-level EV.
It was. And dealers are now facing a strict imminent order cutoff.
But they aren't killing the car globally, are they? Because the report notes they're keeping the EX30 active in Canada and Mexico.
Correct.
So why pull it from the U.S. market?
Well, the memorable detail in the coverage is how Volvo officially explains the retreat. They specifically cite shifting market conditions and financial factors.
Financial factors. Code for the tariffs.
Exactly. They are making it very clear this is not a retreat from electric vehicles overall. It is literally a math problem. By ending U.S. sales of its most affordable EV, Volvo is pivoting its American portfolio toward higher-positioned, much more expensive SUVs.
Like which ones?
Specifically the upcoming EX60 and the updated EX90.
So because of all those supply chain taxes and tariffs, the business case for a budget-friendly EV in the U.S. just deteriorated?
Precisely. If tariffs and supply chain costs make an affordable car unprofitable to import or build, the automaker will simply pull the plug.
Wow.
The American buyer loses access to an entry-level option because the brand has to retreat to higher-margin luxury vehicles just to survive the financial squeeze.
It's a huge loss for the consumer.
It is, but, the massive unknown lurking behind all these numbers and what this source doesn't answer is exactly how much of those billions in added costs are being quietly passed down to you, the consumer, versus absorbed by the manufacturer's profit margins.
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. And with Volvo, the other lingering question is whether they'll ever bring the EX30 back to the U.S. market if those global trade conditions eventually stabilize.
Okay, so let's summarize where we are. Automakers are paying billions more to build cars, and they're canceling their cheaper models to focus on really expensive luxury SUVs.
That's the landscape.
But if automakers are retreating to these high-margin vehicles, who's actually buying them? Because, the average person just needs a reliable way to get to work.
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question. And if you look at the data coming out of dealership networks in this one dealer market brief, the situation is incredibly stark.
What do we see?
Consumers are walking a very dangerous financial tightrope. The automotive retail market is essentially being propped up right now by lenders loosening their credit standards and stretching out loan terms, despite some very heavy economic headwinds.
The stats in this dealer brief are honestly terrifying. I mean, there is a little bit of demand support happening. The brief mentions that larger tax refunds, averaging near $3,700, are temporarily boosting down payments.
Yeah, that's a nice temporary bump.
Right. And the DealerTrack Credit Availability Index shows lenders are much more willing to extend credit.
They are.
But they're especially opening the gates for subprime profiles, which rose to a 17.5% share of the market.
That 17.5% is a critical indicator. Lenders are actively accommodating buyers who might not traditionally qualify simply because the cars have gotten so expensive that they have to loosen the rules to keep the inventory moving off the lot.
That feels like a house of cards.
It really does, because the broader economic reality for those buyers is grim. The brief points out emerging headwinds. The University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index is dropping amid worries over personal finances and geopolitics.
Not to mention the pump.
Exactly. Gas prices are sitting at $3.63 a gallon as of the report's snapshot, which actively erodes household purchasing power month after month.
I want to break down some of the jargon in this report because this is where the math gets truly alarming.
Let's do it.
To get people into these expensive SUVs, the financing has become extreme. The report highlights that 29.3% of auto loans now stretch beyond 72 months.
Yep, over 6 years.
And a staggering 58% of deals have negative equity.
58%.
Can you explain that? Like, I'm 5. What does negative equity actually look like for a buyer on the dealership floor?
Absolutely. So negative equity means you owe more on your current car than the dealer is willing to pay you for it. So let's say you go to buy a $40,000 car, but you still owe $10,000 on your old sedan, which is only worth $5,000.
Ouch.
Right. You have $5,000 in negative equity. The dealer takes that debt, rolls it into your new loan, and now you're taking out a $45,000 loan on a $40,000 car.
That is brutal.
And because the payments on $45,000 are too high for your monthly budget, the lender stretches the loan out to 84 months just to make the monthly payment look affordable.
I have to push back on the logic of this entire system. I mean, if nearly 60% of people are rolling negative equity into loans that take over 6 years to pay off, aren't we just trading a car affordability crisis for a massive debt crisis tomorrow?
It is a phenomenal risk. The dealerships are operating in a highly fragile retail environment that is heavily dependent on debt accommodation.
It just feels unsustainable.
It is. And the elephant in the room that this dealer brief doesn't answer is whether this credit bubble is sustainable long-term if inflation were to sharply reaccelerate. If that lending spigot turns off, the whole ecosystem shudders.
So when you have a system where buyers are drowning in 72-month negative equity loans just to afford a car, the legacy sales model is clearly broken.
Complete.
And that brings us to the automakers who are looking at this fragile dealership model and saying, we need to bypass this entirely.
Exactly. To survive the squeeze of high production costs on one end and financially tapped out consumers on the other, automakers are desperate for ultimate control.
Control over what, exactly?
They want control over the sales process to cut out the middleman, and they want control over the car's software after you buy it. And that desire for control is sparking some intense legal wars.
We see this playing out right now in the coverage of Scout Motors.
Yes, Scout.
This is a legacy-backed startup brand owned by the Volkswagen Group. Their CEO, Scott Keogh, is loudly championing a direct-to-consumer sales model.
Right. He wants to bypass the traditional franchise dealership entirely and sell straight to the driver, just like Tesla or Rivian does.
And he is facing immediate, heavy resistance.
Huge resistance. The reporting details a class action lawsuit filed by 2 Volkswagen dealers who are backed by the massive lobbying power of the National Automobile Dealers Association, or NA.
And what's their main argument?
Their argument relies on state franchise laws. Historically, these laws were put in place to protect local, independent businesses from being crushed by massive corporate automakers. The dealers are arguing that if you are a brand owned by Volkswagen, you must use franchised Volkswagen dealers to sell your cars.
Keogh's reasoning for fighting this is exactly what we've been talking about, though inefficiency.
Yeah.
He argues the traditional system tolerates bloated costs, like local advertising and dealer markups, that the industry just can't afford to pass on to the consumer anymore.
That's a big part of it. But it's not just about the money. He wants a tighter loop with the customer. The source quotes Keogh directly stating he wants to use over-the-air, or OTA, data from the vehicles to make super real-time decisions on quality.
That phrase, super real-time, really reveals the ultimate goal here.
It does. By bypassing the dealer, Scout wants to own the customer data loop end-to-end. If a sensor fails, the factory knows instantly, rather than waiting for a dealer technician to file a warranty report weeks later.
That makes a lot of sense from an engineering perspective.
It does. And this legal battle sets a massive precedent for how both new and legacy automakers approach retail strategies in the future. But the wild card here is the legal system itself.
Right, because it's state by state.
Exactly. What the coverage doesn't answer is how state courts will actually rule on this specific legal maneuvering by a legacy parent company. It's going to be a messy state-by-state brawl.
But, that desire for super real-time control over the vehicle isn't just about efficiency or cutting out the dealer markups.
No, it's much bigger than that.
It has become a literal matter of life and death. And we see that illustrated in this recall notice from Hyundai.
We really do. When you look at the Hyundai situation, you see exactly why automakers feel they must have direct, immediate software access to the cars in your driveway.
It's all connected.
It is. As vehicles rely more heavily on automated, power-operated features, the urgency for rapid software intervention becomes absolutely critical when the physical mechanisms fail.
I want to slow down here because the details of this recall are sobering, and the source provides some truly tragic context.
Yeah, it's a tough read.
Hyundai has issued a stop sale directive and is recalling roughly 68,500 units of the Palisade SUV, specifically the top-tier limited and calligraphy trims.
Those are the luxury trims with all the tech.
Right. And the issue is with the power-operated second and third row seats. The mechanism that folds or slides them is failing to detect occupants or objects in its path.
And we have to acknowledge the gravity of why this recall was issued. The notice states that this follows a fatal incident involving a 2-year-old.
That is just It's heartbreaking.
It is.
And it completely changes the tone of how we talk about these smart automated features.
It starkly highlights the severe safety risks inherent in heavily automated vehicle interiors. When a manual physical lever is replaced by a motorized button, the car has to be smart enough to know when to stop moving.
Exactly. If a physical safety stop is removed and replaced by a sensor, the engineering tolerance for failure is zero.
Zero. Hyundai's immediate response involves offering rental cars to affected owners and holding undelivered inventory.
But the interim fix is what ties this entire conversation together.
Yes, the OTA update.
Right. While they wait to develop a permanent physical repair, the report emphasizes that Hyundai is deploying an over-the-air software update. They are beaming code directly to the vehicles to increase the sensitivity of the seat sensors.
It perfectly illustrates the industry's increasing reliance on software to patch hardware flaws. They can deploy a safety measure to tens of thousands of vehicles instantly without making the customer schedule a service appointment at a dealership.
Which is amazing, but
But the deeply unsettling part is that the recall notice leaves a massive question mark. It doesn't answer what the permanent hardware repair will actually entail or when it will be ready for the consumer.
I have to ask a provocative question here. Are we treating two-ton vehicles too much like smartphones?
That's a great question.
If a physical seat motor is dangerous and failing to detect a person, relying on a software patch to just make it more sensitive feels like putting a digital Band-Aid on a mechanical problem.
It really does.
It's brilliant that they can push an update over the air quickly, but it's unnerving that the physical safety of the hardware is entirely dependent on the code.
It is unnerving, but it is the reality of modern manufacturing. If we step back and synthesize all the sources we've explored, 3 incredibly clear themes emerge from this terrain.
Let's lay them out.
First, macro costs dictate micro choices. The massive $35 billion burden we saw in the tariff report directly dictates the product decisions we saw in the Volvo update.
Right. An affordable EV like the EX30 gets pulled from the U.S. market because the hidden costs of global manufacturing destroy its profitability.
Exactly. The second theme is the consumer affordability tightrope. To bridge the gap between their paychecks and these increasingly expensive vehicles, buyers are stretching their finances to the absolute breaking point.
Yeah, that dealer brief showed us that the industry is relying on record levels of negative equity and historically long loan terms just to keep metal moving off the lot.
Spot on. And the third theme is the battle for software and retail control. Automakers are trying to survive the first 2 problems by seizing direct control of the ecosystem.
They want direct access to the consumer to cut out the bloated dealer costs, like we saw with Scout's legal fight.
Right. And they need direct software access to the car to rapidly deploy fixes for severe safety issues, as demonstrated by the Hyundai Palisade recall.
When you lay all the sources out together like that, you really see the friction in the industry. There are 2 major tensions pulling the automotive world apart right now.
What stands out to you?
First, you have innovation versus regulation. The coverage of Scout shows a brand that wants an efficient, direct-to-consumer sales model that fits the digital age. But they are slamming headfirst into entrenched, state-by-state franchise protection laws supported by the N80.
That's a huge collision. And the second tension is the massive disconnect between automaker pricing and consumer reality.
Elaborate on that.
Well, driven by those macro supply chain costs, automakers are pushing more expensive, higher-margin SUVs like Volvo's pivot to the EX90. But the data from the dealerships shows consumers are severely strained, taking on immense personal debt to afford them.
The product being built is increasingly misaligned with the financial health of the person expected to buy it.
Exactly.
So what is the practical takeaway for you, the listener, the big so what? To me, it's that the traditional lines between the automaker, the local dealership, and you, the buyer, are completely disappearing.
They're blurring rapidly.
From an over-the-air safety update, quietly patching your seat motors while your car is parked in the garage, to a courtroom fight over who is legally allowed to hand you the keys, your car is no longer just a physical product. It is a continuously updated, heavily contested digital device.
Which leaves us with a critical, somewhat unsettling thought to mull over as we wrap up.
What's that?
As cars become entirely software-defined, and as automakers fight to cut out the dealership and manage your vehicle directly from their corporate headquarters, who really owns the car in your driveway?
Wow!
Is it you, the person holding the paper title? Or is it the manufacturer who can beam an update to it, alter its performance, or change its safety sensors from 1,000 miles away?
That is a question we are all going to have to answer sooner rather than later. Thank you for joining us on this segment of Auto News Talk. As a next step, keep a very close eye on how state franchise laws respond to that Scout lawsuit.
It's going to be fascinating to watch.
The outcome there could permanently change the landscape of the local dealerships in your own town and dictate exactly who you buy your next car from. We'll be watching it closely. Drive safe, and we'll see you next time.